We are live on the DSPN YouTube channel. The day after a very tough performance. I just got to tell you right now, this is a one-man show. No Martin Devlin at the moment. He is on holiday, so it is Lachlan Waugh putting everything together. That's my name. So I do appreciate you turning up for this one. Sunday, September the 14th. The sun came up. That is all that matters. And when you watch a performance like that from the All Blacks last night, 43-10, the final score, if you've managed to avoid it, which is a good thing, if you've managed to avoid it, then well done. This All Black performance in Wellington, it's really tough to put it into words. It really is. And by the way, I've got the chat up here with me now, so please do join in, please do contribute, and I'll get to a fair few of those comments in a sec. But I'm really struggling to put into words what went on in New Zealand's capital city last night. 43-10, the final score, as I say, the second matchup between the All Blacks and the Springboks. I think after that Eden Park one, I wasn't too sure how to approach this game. I was a bit nervous because I thought the All Blacks could get complacent. I thought that they could take their foot off the pedal and they could view this fixture as not as important as that Eden Park one. And I think a lot of fans probably were nervous about that, at least the ones that I was talking to during the week. And, geez, here we go. One comment straight away from a guy in South Africa. Hi, guys, 2 a.m. here in South Africa. Still celebrating. Ha, ha, ha. Yeah, look, laugh away, because I think every Kiwi watching that game last night, whether you were in the stand, whether you were like me and you managed to head out to the pub with a few friends and watch it with other people there as well, you would sit there and realise, it was just an absolute travesty to watch that game. The All Black jumper, it was embarrassing, it was awful. The first half, look, let's get some game specifics. I thought the first half, untidy from both teams. I thought neither side really turned up and played that well. I thought we had a few attacking opportunities and we took them. That obviously the only try that we scored was Leo Ricciardo who scored it, wasn't it? Obviously, South Africa could have opened the scoring with that try that got pulled back for that knock-on at the breakdown. Neither side, I think, really had much of an edge. I think, again, at set-piece time, South Africa were a little bit better in that first half. But I thought at half-time that we didn't really learn a huge amount, and I didn't know really what was going to happen in that second half. I wasn't too sure what to expect. I just thought neither side had brought their A game early on. It was there for the taking for both teams. We both had opportunities. And then from there, it was in the balance. It was evenly poised, as some say. The second half, though, was, it was encapsulated perfectly, I think. South Africa brought on two props in the 43rd minute, might have been. They brought on two props. So they pretty much had a new front row. Malcolm Marx was still on the field. That scrum of theirs was reminiscent of the one they got last week at Eden Park that totally bulldozed us. And they got, I think, their first try at Eden Park. I think it was their first try. Last night, pushed our forwards to the side, by the way. So they went through us, but then pushed the forwards to the side. So it took our forwards out of the equation from a defensive perspective for the next few plays, right? They get the ball, move it quickly. Khaleesi has this incredible break. I didn't know he had that sort of pace, by the way. And quick recycle, ball gets spread wide, lofting pass. Colby gets it. And what felt like a couple of seconds, the Springboks scored a try, and I thought, damn, one, that was good. Two, that looked a little bit too easy for them. So they took it to another level. And that first sort of real moment in the second half where they scored that try and went up 14-10, I think, after that, because it was 10-7 at half time. I thought, okay, they're just throwing us a right hook, we've got to respond here. And it sounds barbaric, but I thought the All Blacks for the first 20 minutes of the second half actually weren't terrible. Again, it was reminiscent of the first half. I think South Africa upped their game a bit. They certainly won the kicking battle. I think Damien McKenzie and Beauden Barrett In terms of the distance kicking, actually Will Jordan as well, because he had a terrible kick that went dead, obviously misjudged the wind behind him in the second half. I thought our kicking game was poor, really poor. I wouldn't say we went to another level last week, but we sort of righted the wrongs last week of our kicking game in Argentina, right? And it wasn't perfect, but it was better. Not the case at all last night. South Africa certainly had the edge. We weren't as bad under the high ball, actually. We got a fair few results there. I thought Leo Ricardo was good. Mackenzie again was pretty good under the high ball. But South Africa were better. They were better. And their kicking was far more directed. They really started to turn the screw in terms of pinning us in our own half in that second half. And then there was moments where we would actually string some phases together and we actually got some meters and we actually looked all right. I think our ball movement was actually improved as well. It's one thing we've been poor at this year is actually sticking those passes and maintaining, some flow in the back line and actually getting good supply out to our wings. We didn't do that well at all against Argentina in the second test, but it's sort of gotten better as the tests have gone. Started poorly, it's gotten better. And that was actually quite good last night. The problem was there were moments where we actually got some phases and then Beauden Barrett would try these little chip kicks or Mackenzie would do the same or put these grubbers in, and I just thought, they've just scored this brilliant try, South Africa. They're now leading. They've got an edge. They're throwing it round. Boy, did they throw it round, the Springboks. They played at such pace, and we sort of really struggled to match that, didn't we? But then when we would get ball and phases and build them, nothing would really come of it. So that was, frustrating. Nothing would come of it and we'd shoot ourselves in the foot. I think that first 20 minutes of the second half, we found some result, but then South Africa would get some chances. They had that great break down the left side that Grant Williams had that didn't result in a try, but it was sort of their first for a few minutes, and it sort of followed what we'd done for a couple of minutes when we had the ball, and they nearly scored. They didn't, nearly did. And then, again, when they had their opportunities, they turned the screw and they took advantage of them. The All Blacks, I thought, were so untidy. There was that break we had when they just scored that try that put them up 14-10, where Will Jordan, we've got a 3-on-1. It's a really good delayed pass to Will Jordan, who hits the gap. You've just got to lay it on short or go long. And it's like he was in two minds, and the ball went past, I think it was Billy Proctor, before he got subbed, past Billy Proctor. And then it went to pretty much the feet of Leo Ricardo, who couldn't do anything. There was no way he was going to pick that up. So that was a poor moment, but that was really good play, and then shooting ourselves in the foot and ruining it. So as much as there were some promising moments from the All Blacks, we couldn't at all in any way take advantage. And South Africa did. The pace they played at was incredible, and it's something that we should be able to match, and I think we were trying to, but it was the line speed as well. It was the way they moved the ball. There was a moment where we put the ball out, and they quickly threw it back in, and before you could really turn your head, I think Scott Barrett had got on the ball. I think he'd lost it backwards, and it went out, and South Africa had a quick throw in, and then out of nowhere, they just turned the jets on, and then that was the moment where you saw Scott Barrett sort of very slowly walking back across the field, and they played at a pace South Africa that we couldn't handle. And the second half was, again, I said earlier, the first half was up and down, pretty ordinary. Both sides had some moments. It was sort of like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of performance, but the game was in the balance. That second half, perfect. It was near perfect from South Africa. And I think us All Blacks fans, we cannot sit here, we can sit here and complain and criticise the performance for sure. You've got a round of applause to South Africa. They responded after really not looking great last week. I thought as much as the All Blacks played really well in Auckland, the Springboks, without a doubt, were their own worst enemy last week. And we made things uncomfortable at the breakdown in particular. This week, what's the opposite of your own worst enemy? You're your best friend. I don't know, I guess that's the best way to put it. They were just awesome last night, South Africa, and we didn't respond. And that's actually really concerning. We didn't respond at all. We tried to, and then there'd be some inaccuracies and inefficiencies. It was a really, really, really puzzling. I think strategically it was puzzling in those moments where we'd put those kicks in, which really, those really have stuck with me and really frustrated me. How to sum up overall the All Black performance? The Springboks themselves obviously were great, and we were untidy. But I think in the great scheme of what's been going on for the last couple of years, and when I say that, it's great beating the Springboks last week. It's wonderful beating Ireland last year. We should have beaten France. We should have won one of the tests in South Africa last year. And so when you look at this sort of year and a half under Scott Robertson, it's 2025, isn't it? We're 2 years out from the next World Cup. It's been 2 years since the last one. At what point do we start to get a little bit nervous? Because the trajectory, sort of what's gone on here, is actually a little bit similar to what happened with South Africa and New Zealand back in 2017 at North Harbour. So we beat South Africa 57-0 that night. That was in 2017. It was in between the two World Cups. And that was sort of South Africa's lowest ebb. And then things changed. And then for us, we just won back-to-back World Cups. And it was a performance to remind everyone, no, we're still the best in the world. That was what South Africa did last night, right? They're back-to-back World Cup winners. Results haven't been the flashiest maybe this year. You know, we lost to Australia and then lost to us last week. But then they reminded the world, hey, no, we are the best. We're the best team, and we're going to go ahead and smack up New Zealand in their own backyard. So there's some similarities between what went on last night and what happened at North Harbour in 2017. And also, I think the Springboks have been wanting revenge for that performance for a long time now. And they sort of got it last night. They sort of did. If you're just joining, we are live the day after the All Blacks Springboks Wellington test, the second test between these two. It actually physically hurts to sort of talk about this game. 43-10 the final score. Producer Lachlan Waugh is sitting in here for Martin Devlin. Marty's on holiday. He is overseas. He's in Rome, I think. Found himself a nice sports bar on what would have been Saturday morning, Roma time, and has managed to hopefully enjoy a sleep at the moment to sort of try and wash away what he watched. Because I guess, what's the time right now? It's 12:17, so it's what? It's 2:17 a.m. in Italy, I think. Please keep the comments filtering through. There's a lot of them. And let's get to them now. One here, the players have gotten soft. There we go. I lost the comment for a second. Arcanum 24, players have gotten soft. Yeah, All Blacks will be back, but lots of work to do. That's incredibly optimistic. That from Raymond Butcher. Thank you, Raymond. 2 tries were not allowed by the Box. The 9 knocked the ball, and Colby was stopped from scoring. That's from Salah. Yeah, that early one to them as well, which was a bit of a sign of things to come, I think. That try that didn't get allowed with a knock onto the ruck. Box changed the coach in 2017. They did. That from PB. Thank you, PB. I'll get to that in a sec. I've sort of touched on the similarities just then. Use your words, Lachlan. We were useless. We were, Glenn. Thank you, Glenn Woods. I was at a pub with some friends last night, and I think it might have been South Africa's first try to start the second half. I think it might have been that one. It could have been no. It was their try that they scored. They put them up 43-10. It was the last try they scored, because to see us concede 40 at home, I just couldn't believe it. And I stood there and I was pouring a beer, and then I looked up, and I just stood there with the beer in my hands with my mouth open for about 20 seconds because I couldn't. It was like I was malfunctioning. I couldn't understand what I was watching, and I think there is an overall feeling of disbelief, isn't there? Raymond Butcher says, Lachlan bravely facing the fans. Thank you, Raymond. It's not that hard. I tell you what, if I was a Warriors fan, it'd be very hard. That's a rubbish night for New Zealand sport, isn't it? The Warriors getting beaten 24-8 was the final score against Penrith, and the All Blacks losing 43-10. I mean, I'm not a Warriors fan, but I can understand that that's tough stuff for the Warriors and their fans and whatnot. This one from Damon Selwyn. Lachlan, if Razor loses the Bledisloe, do you think he should be sacked? Razor has no confidence, and I don't think he's the guy for the job. That from Salah. Damon and Salah asking similar questions there about Razor. Oh, gosh. I hate chat around coaches getting sacked, but let's rewind to 2022, right? Now, that was 1 year out from a World Cup, not 2 years out. Ian Foster lost 5 tests in the space of 6. So we'd actually lost our last 2 of 2021. We'd lost to France and Ireland on the road. Now, also, before that, we'd actually had a pretty good test season in 2021. We'd lost 1 test to the Springboks, but we'd beaten them as well. And there was that makeshift, I think it was a Tri-Nations or a Rugby Champ. I think they called it the Tri-Nations, but there was 4 teams in it. Was that 2021? There was definitely 4 teams, because we played Argentina on the Gold Coast, and I think we might have played them in Townsville or something like that. Anyway, there was a Rugby Championship makeshift one in Queensland, sort of like a bubble one, right? And we'd actually played pretty well. We'd absolutely smacked up Argentina in 1 test. And we'd beaten them pretty handily in another one. And then we beat the Springboks, I think it was up in Townsville on the Gold Coast. We beat them 31-29. Then we lost to them. And then I think we had a good win over Wales in the end of year tour. So by the numbers, it had been a good test season 2021 for the All Blacks. And then we lost to France and Ireland. But we got beaten pretty convincingly in both tests. And I was like, okay, not a great finish to 2021. 2022 starts. We beat Ireland 42-19 at Eden Park. But it was a weird test, wasn't it? It was kind of like, okay, we put 40 on Ireland, but we sort of were a bit lucky with some of those tries, and they had more of the ball and more territory and whatnot. Yeah, we'll take that. Then we lose the next week in Dunedin, and then we lose that third test in Wellington, and we got really outplayed in Wellington. And then, okay, we lost the series at home to Ireland. Ian Foster is really, the knives are out for him at that point. They had a cancelled media session, the All Blacks, on that Sunday, and then you had the media manager who, at the time, who I always got on really well with, but that media manager, she had cancelled a media session and she'd released some statement on LinkedIn, and it was a sign of division within the All Blacks New Zealand rugby. And then of course we lost to the Springboks, and it just felt like, at least in my time as a fan, has anything ever been worse? And what happened after all of that, it's taken me a while to get to the point here, what happened after all of that was Mark Robertson, the CEO of New Zealand Rugby, got flown over to South Africa after we lost to the Springboks in Nelspruit. He got flown over to sack Ian Foster. And then what happens? We beat them at Ellis Park with an incredibly courageous, valiant performance. We beat them, I think 35-22 was that the score, 35-25, something around there. And then all of a sudden, the All Blacks are back, and Mark Robinson doesn't sack Ian Foster. That felt like an incredibly low ebb. And it felt like not only are we losing these tests, but we're a step below a number of other countries. And that is the feeling I got last night, that we are steps below the Springboks. If both teams are playing to their best on their day, something along those lines, we can't beat them. And we didn't have any answers in that second half. I don't think Leo Ricardo, I thought, stood out to an extent in as much of a way as you can. I think Ardie Savea showed glimpses, he was still putting work in. He got a turnover there at the second half at one point. I thought Damien McKenzie, his kicking was ineffective. I thought Will Jordan was disappointing. Billy Proctor was pretty good, but no one really stood out. Brodie McAllister, I thought he didn't make any difference or any improvement at line-out time when he came on. Scott Barrett has been up and down this year. I think people are very quick to criticise him because he's not exactly the most engaging figure, I guess, if that makes sense. But I thought he was pretty absent last night. I don't think Finlay Christie did anything terribly wrong when he came on, but again, I don't think he made a difference. We didn't swing any punches. We got smacked around and we didn't swing any back. And that's the embarrassing part of this performance, is that not only do we not really have an answer, but it just felt that when we got knocked down, not only could we not put together a strategy to get back up, we just didn't really have that oomph. Like, physically, South Africa were bullying us. Whenever there was a break in play, they were pushing us around, they were laughing in our face, and we were sort of trying to throw it back, but there was no real return serve. And that's so incredibly discouraging about this All Black team. And then you sit there and you ask yourself, well, what's changed? What's improved? Because there was moments like this last year, right, where the whole thing about the All Blacks was they couldn't score points in the final 20 minutes. But for the first 60 minutes, they were playing relatively well. And if they can just learn how to finish off and to maintain, I guess, the fitness level. I mean, that's a suggestion that your fitness level's not right, isn't it? If you can go hard out for 60 minutes, but then you fall away in the last 20. Maybe, I'm not too sure. But it felt that the blueprint for the most part was there. Let's just make sure that, we're a bit more effective and whatnot. And then it feels we've gone backwards with that performance last night. The first test against Argentina was good enough, but it felt we could improve, and then we were awful the following week. Last week against the Boks at Eden Park, we were good. We were very good, I thought. It was an untidy game. Yeah, the Springboks weren't great, but there's your level. I said this during the week. There's your level. Take it to another level. It's what I wanted Rich McCaw to tell the players when he was in camp with them. You've got a level. You've just set a new standard. Go to the next level. Maintain that standard and improve on it. Because that's what the great All Blacks teams of the past did. The All Blacks of the 2010s. You could have an untidy win against Ireland at the end of 2013, for example, when we get out of jail. But it's a win, right? And you'll have a 50-0 sort of drubbing of someone. We put 51 on Australia at Eden Park in 2014. Like, those great All Blacks teams would, whether the performance was great or it was up and down, they at least maintained a standard of winning. And they did it week in, week out, for the most part, obviously. We lost a test here and there. But you could always rely on that team to go out there and find ways to win. And, that was the way that they'd exceed in the last 20 minutes. Maybe that was a fitness thing, I'm not too sure. But that's the most concerning thing about this All Black performance last night. And I said this to a friend, is there a plan B? Where's the plan B? Do we have a plan B? Ideally, you shouldn't need a plan B, but where is it? That was the most confusing thing. No response. Actually, confusing is putting it lightly. Embarrassing. I mean, it's our biggest ever loss. 33 points. It's our biggest ever loss. Our previous biggest was 28 points. That was at Twickenham in 2023, and that felt different to this one. That was, it was before the World Cup. I think we'd sort of mixed up our selections a little bit. We were trying a few things. We had a couple of yellow cards, I think, early on, and physically South Africa were just taking the contest to us up front with their forward set piece, and they just bulldozed us. But I remember coming away from it thinking, I don't think that's us taking that test totally seriously. There's no reason why we shouldn't be taking last night's test seriously. Like, how do you defend that? Like, if you're Scott Robertson, who I don't think should get sacked or lose his job, and if we lose the Bledisloe, I don't think he should. But, where's the consequence for that sort of performance? I'm just curious to know what happens from here, because we've seen that the All Blacks are a little reliant on some selections. They're not really going to make sweeping changes. They made a few ahead of this test. I don't think the selections they made or the changes they made impacted the game in such a way. You could have rolled out that team from last week. You could have rolled out the best version of the All Blacks probably from 2023 at the World Cup. I don't think anyone really beats that Springboks side. That was a great Box performance. It was near perfect, that second half in particular. So yeah, keep the comments coming. A few more here. Can't work out the AB's game plan. That's from Murray Calder. PB says too many All Blacks weak off the ball. Agreed. I think again physically we just aren't bringing the content. Like last week we did. I thought at the breakdown we were awesome. We weren't great at the breakdown this week, and that's actually another area where South Africa were able to get their game plan working. They wanted to throw the ball around. They wanted to spread it. They wanted to play some Tony Brown ball. And what sort of, I guess, prevented that a bit last week, selections aside, was the fact that they just couldn't get quick, clean ball out of the ruck because we disrupted it so much. There wasn't much of that going on last night. That same disruptive All Black breakdown performance. So, what happened? That sort of allowed them to get into their game plan. So again, physically, it's an energy, it's a physical thing, I'm not too sure. I mean, they played at a pace that we should be able to match. We kind of couldn't. They could just go quicker, more intense for longer. But aren't the All Blacks meant to be this exciting, exhilarating team that plays this, this open, expansive, sweeping type of rugby? Isn't that who we are? So why did we sort of get beaten by playing that sort of style? I don't know. This one from Doug Franklin, amusing that after all the crap he gave Fozzie, the disrespect he showed, and the, excuse my French, shit-stirring he did, Robertson has now become the coach responsible for the biggest ever AB defeat in history. Now, I want to actually get into this. Thank you, Doug, for your comment. So, I like Scott Robertson. I think he's a good coach, and I think... I was going to say I think he should be given time, but I don't think you should be given much time as the All Black coach, to be honest. So I won't say that, but I do think he's a good coach, and I like him. However, looking at it all objectively, you're right. He played a big role in not a big role, but he played a bit of a role in the whole anti-Fozzie thing, I think, and that was inflamed by what he did. Scott Robertson, and I think it was a slip of the tongue, but I remember there was a press conference in early 2023 when he was still the Crusaders coach, and what Scott Robertson said was, I'm just waiting for NZR to make the announcements, really, and because he was asked about the All Black job, and his reply was, I'm waiting for them to make the announcement. So he was essentially saying that, yeah, the job's mine, the All Black job, I'm just waiting for them to confirm it publicly. And that, look, I don't know if that was Scott Robertson purposely putting something out there to make people uncomfortable. I think it was a genuine just slip of the tongue and he didn't mean to, because I don't think he's a bad person. I don't think he's a nasty, bad guy at all, Scott Robertson. But he said something that I thought, that's just made things worse. that's just made a whole lot of people talk about the future of the All Black coaching job. Fozzie now is walking down the street getting asked about, oh, Razor's made this comment, what's the deal? It's more of an indication to Ian Foster that New Zealand Rugby don't want him / don't like him because they're talking to Razor for the job, right? Post the World Cup. Now, I think everyone sort of felt at the time that there was already a clear division between New Zealand Rugby and Ian Foster, that if he actually keeps the job, it's a bit of a surprise if that happens. But if he wins the World Cup, you've got to give him the job, right? Obviously, we didn't end up winning the World Cup. We lost in the final. But I remember thinking, this doesn't help anyone. It makes things worse. And it's one thing I didn't like that Scott Robertson did. So back to your comment, Doug, I do sort of agree with you there that it's a bit funny how I think Scott Robertson didn't do enough to prevent, like he never came out during all of that stuff going on with Ian Foster when he was going to lose his job. Mark Robinson flew over to South Africa to sack him. The belief was Razor was going to get the job. There were rumblings that he was the guy that was going to be put into that role in 2022. And during that period, if you were interviewing Scott Robertson on radio or for print or on TV or Ian Foster, a lot of the talk was around who's going to be the next coach, what's happening with the job. And I think Scott Robertson at the time could have done more to say, hey, look, Ian Foster's the All Blacks coach right now. He's in the role. I would be silly to say that I wouldn't one day want the job. Obviously I do, but right now I'm the Crusaders coach, and right now Ian Foster's the All Blacks coach. He's got my full support. We're all on the same team. We all want the All Blacks to win. I'll just leave it at that. But he's the All Black coach. Let's leave it at that. But he never really did that, Scott Robertson. And I don't think he showed enough support publicly to Ian Foster. I don't think anyone did. No one at NZR did. Mark Robinson never really did. So I see what you're saying there, Doug. It's an interesting comment, but I do find it amusing that he's got the job now, Razor. He, again, I like him. I don't have an issue with him. I think he's a good coach, and I'm happy for him at this point of time to have the All Black coaching job. Obviously, if we lose more tests, if we lose the Bledisloe Cup, my opinion will absolutely change. But for the time being, I don't have an issue with him having the job, and I like him. But, he was seen as the Messiah in many ways, wasn't he? The knight in shining armour on the white horse rolling in. He's going to turn the All Blacks around. And he was given a pretty good base because that All Black team, the way they performed at the 2023 World Cup, yes, we lost a lot of experience. Obviously, Aaron Smith, both Sam Whitelock and Brody Retallick gone. But he had a pretty good base to work with. And if he's as good as what we were under the impression he is, or what we were led to believe, then shouldn't we be winning more? Or at least if we're losing, we shouldn't be losing in that manner the way that we did last night. It's all a bit hard to kind of piece together. Like, what's going on here? I think it's something as simple as that Scott Robertson is taking a bit of time to adjust to Test rugby. I think it's as simple as that. I think that it's the division or the difference between Super Rugby and Test rugby is larger now. And I don't know if that's down to the South Africans. People are quick to say that them leaving Super Rugby ruined New Zealand Rugby. I don't think that's quite the case. But the division between the two is larger. There's a bigger gap, right? So the adjustment as a player going from Super Rugby to Test Rugby is tougher, and I have no doubt that the adjustment going from Super Rugby to Test Rugby as a coach is tougher as well. Because the last coach that we had that went straight from Super Rugby to Test Rugby was John Mitchell, wasn't it? Wasn't John Mitchell I was a little kid at the time, so my memory, obviously, I don't really have one. But John Mitchell was he the Waikato coach or the Chiefs coach at the time? And then he got the All Blacks job. So, Graham Henry didn't go straight from a Super Rugby team to the All Blacks. Obviously, Shag and Fozzie didn't either. They all had some sort of test experience as well. So Razor's actually never coached international rugby. Now, I think he coached Brazil or something for a couple of matches. That doesn't count. So he doesn't have that test experience. So he's still sort of learning on the job, I think. Which, for the first year, I think I can take on the chin. But this is year 2. The World Cup's 2 years away. I wouldn't mind seeing some better results. I guess if it was last year, it would still hurt, but it feels like we've got time. But at the moment, it doesn't really feel like we've got a lot of time. So, yeah, I think Razor's just taking a little bit of time to adjust to Test rugby. That's my sort of main thinking. But yeah. Razor's edge, as dull as a hammer. Thank you, PB. That's a funny comment. Eddie Jones for next AB's coach, mate. Thank you, Arcanum24. You've got a few laughing faces on there as well. I mean, I don't know, maybe Eddie Jones would actually sharpen this team up because they just look soft. Last night they looked soft, did the All Blacks. Man, it's just, I tell you what, it actually hurts to think about it. I woke up this morning and I just thought, far out, I can't believe what happened last night. Which, look, again, let's establish something here. We're talking about sport. Obviously, there's more important things in life. But if we are able to just kind of close in these four walls and in this little room, this room that we're sharing right now, this room of grief and mourning and pain, let's just imagine that this is the most important thing in the world right now. I'm not going to sit here and say it's a travesty and an abomination and unacceptable. Unacceptable is a fair word to use. There's a word I'm trying to think that Mark Watson said on Sport Nation, the word that I thought was intense. Unforgivable, that's what he said, unforgivable. Okay, I don't think this is unforgivable because I think if we win the World Cup in a couple of years, well, I'm not going to worry too much about this test. But I think unacceptable, inexplicable, embarrassing again, that's the word I keep using, just utterly embarrassing. Like I was wearing my All Blacks jersey last night and I didn't want to take it off, I didn't want to cover it up. I put my jacket on, but I left my jacket open so you could still see the silver fern. Because I'm still an All Blacks fan, I still love this team, I'm still a Kiwi. Still got a lot of national pride, but just embarrassing. Deflating, painful, yeah. But again, it's the manner that we lost. There are tests that we've won and tests that we've lost where the score has actually flattered the opposition a bit. Last night that did not flatter. That didn't flatter really anyone. That was a fair representation. Yeah, again, just painful. Thank you for all of the comments and the views, the likes. Appreciate all of the support. My name is Lachlan Waugh. I'm typically the producer of DSPN, sitting in for Martin Devlin at the moment. He's away on holiday in Europe. We are live the day after just an absolute massacre in Wellington. The All Blacks 43-10 losers to the Springboks. Losers. Utter losers. There is for any Seinfeld or Veep fans out there, let me know in the comments if you are a Seinfeld or a Veep fan. I love those two shows. And Julia Louis-Dreyfus was just one of my favourite actors / comedians of all time. And there's a way that she describes something goes on in Veep. If anyone hasn't seen Veep, it's a satirical US politics show. And it's all about how Julia Louis-Dreyfus is the vice president. And it's all about, just the black, dark nature of politics and how nasty people are and how bad they are, but also just how dysfunctional the staff members around her are. And there's a moment where they get something wrong, it's something on the campaign trail, they get something wrong, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who's the vice president, just stands there like pointing out all of her staff members, just saying how rubbish they are. And she just yells, "Losers," really loud. And I find it hilarious. I hope that's what Razor did to his players, and then I hope that's what the CEO, Mark Robertson, I think, still the CEO, or David Kirk maybe turned up and then pointed at all of them and said, "You're all losers. You're losers." I hope he did. That would be great. Absolutely great. Elaine's dance, Razor's dance, yeah, they're just as good as each other, aren't they, Glenn? Little thumbs and the kicks. Razor should do that next time. The Last Dragon, get rid of 2 Barretts for now. I still think Geordie's our best option at second. I wouldn't mind seeing Geordie back at fullback for a little bit. I think we do need to try something. I thought Billy Proctor was really good last night, by the way. Well, compared to a lot of the other performances, I thought he actually played really well. Bad day for the Barretts. Yeah. New nickname, Ray Gun. Thank you, Doug. Razor should do the right thing and quit that from PB. No, I don't think so. I got to say, at what point, I touched on this a little bit before, at what point do we sit there and start to question whether he should keep his job? And I guess that's a decision, obviously, for the powers that be. I don't think Razor will get sacked. I mean, if he lost the Bledisloe, which would mean I think we have to lose both tests, they'd have to beat us at Eden Park, Australia. That's in 2 weeks, by the way. That could well and truly happen. Australia, I thought, again, were pretty valiant last night against Argentina. Argentina with a better side, but Australia showed a lot of fight. You know what Australia did, by the way? You know what they did in Sydney? They did what the All Blacks didn't. They fought back. They managed to get a little bit of momentum. Things go their way. They got their tails up. They lost the test, and that's not great. Losing at home to Argentina isn't ideal. But the Wallabies at least showed a bit of fight, you know? And it's the one thing under Joe Schmidt, and Christy Doran talked about this on the show earlier, last week I guess it is now. He talked about how it's different this time around under Joe Schmidt because they're more disciplined, they take care of the ball, the penalties have gone down. There's I don't think Australia have had any yellow cards or red cards this year, by the way. And there's just an improvement in the discipline department. And they're just showing a bit of fight. They're just maintaining that fight. They're staying in the contest. And the All Blacks didn't do that. I mean, again, I cannot get my head around how softly they rolled over in that second half. And they tried a few things, but again, the polish around those things, you know, putting in little chip kicks or grubbers when you've built some phases, and you didn't need to do that. Keep going. South Africa are getting the ball and they're doing something with it. They're scoring points. They're getting down your end of the field. They're playing at pace. You can't handle it. They are getting an edge in the breakdown. Set piece. I haven't even gotten into our scrum or our line out. I think I've touched on it a little bit. Poor. The scrum is a real concern. Jason Ryan has got to sort out the scrum. He's got to sort it out. Because during the week, now last week I think after the test, I think it was last weekend, I think it was the All Blacks Sunday media conference, Jason Ryan said that, along the lines of, that's not happening again. Or we'll make sure that doesn't happen again. Well, it happened again, Jason. It happened last night. The line out has progressively gotten worse. The delivery's not great, and we're getting picked off. So whatever the signals are, or whatever the deceptive runs in the line out by Tupavai or Scott Barrett, whoever is being lifted, those aren't fooling the Saffers. Yeah, set piece has really gone downhill. And look, South Africa have always been the type of nation that when we play them in rugby, from a set piece perspective, that we're never really going to have the edge, or we can at least hold our own. But again, just so poor at scrum time, so poor. There was another moment, I've just remembered it now, where we had a good attacking chance. We'd managed to get the ball down their end of the field. I think it was 14-10 still at this point. And we had a line out, and then we get pinged for offside because Wallace Satiti puts himself between Scott Barrett and the defence. Just inaccuracies. Silly inaccuracies. We did shoot ourselves in the foot in that second half in a lot of parts. By the way, I want to make quick mention to the Black Ferns because I haven't yet, and I do apologise. But we've got to honour the one New Zealand rugby team overnight that did win. The Black Ferns beating South Africa 46-17, a great result. I was watching the first half of that test, or that World Cup quarter-final, and I thought, gee, South Africa are really taking it to us here. I thought, we can't lose to South Africa twice in a matter of hours. We did it, thankfully, 46-17 the final score. I think it was 10-all at half-time. Pretty sure it was 10-all. So well done to the Black Ferns, great result. And they've got the Canadians in the semi-finals, which is pretty good. It means England and France are going to probably play in the other semi. Now, we lost to Canada in New Zealand last year, didn't we? So hopefully we don't do that again. But I think the Black Ferns have actually started to really put together some good form. Anyway, let's get back to the All Blacks, because I think that's what we're all here for. We're all here to talk about the All Blacks. They are not on roids, just bigger and stronger and better. That's from Sandor Clegane. Sandor? No, they're not on roids. I didn't say they're on roids, the South Africans. But they are just bigger and stronger, or better. I think that's a better word to use. You've said that there. Alex says embarrassing. Agreed, Alex. We've most certainly established how embarrassing that was from the All Blacks. This from David Butchis. Marty went to Rome to ask the Pope for All Blacks blessings. Yeah, there you go. Maybe we can blame Marty. The Devlin curse. Well and truly going on here. We lack the intimidation factor against an alpha team like the Box. Artie would be the only player who would fire up. Tupavai looked like a deer in the headlights when Snyman gave him some niggle. Again, physically we just did not take it to them. We did not hold our own. And again, they certainly ruffled our feathers when there were breaks in play. And we just seemed to get a little bit agitated by that. We drew with Canada this year. This from Amy Olivia. Thank you, Amy. That's the Black Ferns drew with Canada this year. Yeah, we did lose to them last year, though, didn't we? So it's a side that, what I'm trying to say there is, it's a side that can give us a little bit of trouble. And they are good, Canada, in women's rugby. They are a good side. Other Black Ferns on roids? That from Alias. Thank you, Alias. No, they're not. They're just playing well, I think. Yeah, Doug Franklin again. All the shit Robertson gave Fozzie. Now it's Robertson who has the big New Zealand loss in history. Yeah, we've talked about that. Yeah, focus 1-on-1. Would you sign a petition to ban Sky Stadium hosting All Blacks games? I think so. We were four wins out of our last 10 going into that test last night, so we're now 4 wins in our last 11 at the Cape Town. Clearly a stadium we can't win at. And it's also not a great stadium. I hate that stadium. It's a terrible stadium for rugby games. It's a terrible stadium for football games, league games. It's a circular stadium. It's good for cricket. The whole manner in which that was built was strange, wasn't it? Because they didn't want to put floodlights at the basin, so they needed a cricket ground that you could have night games at, so they had to do that. The whole weird ordeal about how they got built. That's a terrible stadium. I hate that stadium. I seriously hate it. It's not a good stadium. Is Razor brave enough to blood a new captain? Well, again, I mean, you don't want to be conservative, do you, after that defeat? That one there from Mark Teal. Thank you, Mark. I don't think, like, if Ardie Savea is the captain, do the All Blacks play better? It's a genuine question. I don't know. I don't know if I don't think the players playing so poorly and the clear average game plan that's being implemented by the coaches, I don't think that is sort of washed away and brushed aside by Ardie Savea being the captain, for example. Not too sure. Quita says we are no longer that team. Yep. And that's another thing that hurts. You know, the All Blacks, the jersey, the success of this team for over 100 years, the one thing, even when they would lose, I'm sure all of the greats of the past, guys as far back as George Napier and Waka Nathan and Don Clark, those greats of the past, even the guys in the 80s and the 90s, your Shaw Fitzpatricks, your Grant Foxes, Buck Shelfords, Michael Jones, Colin Meads, all of these greats of the past, Ian Kirkpatrick, Wilson Wineray, and the guys in the 2000s, Dan Carter, Richard McCaw, Martin Ona, Conrad Smith, Kevin Milami, all of these wonderful players who have worn the black jumper. How do they feel watching that performance? The ones who are still with us. But even though, you know, how would any of these greats of the past react to that sort of defeat? And I know there's a thing about the All Blacks where you don't really criticise them. If you've played for them once, you're not critical. If you've worn the black jumper, you're not too, which is why I quite like Justin Marshall, because he does tend to give it to them, the players and this team when they don't perform well. What's the reaction from those greats of the past to a loss like that? And how do you defend it? How do you come back from it? Just painful. You know, I saw footage of Damien McKenzie doing a mixed zone interview post-match, and he wasn't like smiling or anything. He didn't have any sort of smirks on his face, but he sort of pieced his words together and said, "Oh yeah, the boys are hurting. It's not good enough." Blah blah blah. And if that was me and I was being interviewed after that sort of loss, I would just say to everyone there, like, just embarrassed. I'm just embarrassed that my team just went out there and did that. I'm embarrassed that us players put out a performance so bad. Like, I just wonder, is there enough hurt? Is there enough pain within the camp, within the playing group? Do they feel the pain that, you know, fans who are in their 60s, 70s and 80s and have been watching the All Blacks all their lives and have watched so many different teams and eras, those fans are sitting there going, sure, we lost tests in the past, sure, we had a terrible run in 2022, we weren't great in, was it 1998 or 97 around there, we lost quite a few tests before that 99 World Cup. You know, the All Blacks of the past, they've had these dips in the past, but I just don't think they've ever had a loss as humiliating as that. How do you defend it? How do you come back from it? Like, what goes on? You know, the players are damn lucky they're not playing a game in a week's time, because I'd like to think that if they went into camp, that they'd just be absolutely ripped to shreds by the coaches. But at the same time, the coaches aren't without blame, are they? Like, there was a shot of Razor and Scott Hansen just sitting there in the coaches' box post-game, just staring at each other with their arms folded. It's like, what if you're them, how do you come back from that? But also, you know, Razor, you and your coaches, you've wanted this job for a long time. You know, Jason Ryan's been in the environment longer than you have, actually. But you guys have all wanted this job. You were gunning for it. Razor really wanted it in 2019, didn't get it. Obviously had to be in his bonnet for a long time, they didn't have it. And you would, because you obviously always think you're good enough to be the All Blacks coach. Things have gone his way with how it ended with Ian Foster, and the job's yours. And a year and a half later, like, this team isn't better than that 2023 World Cup team. That team in 2023 that beat Ireland in the quarterfinals and then narrowly lost to South Africa in that final, and I still feel that if we hadn't have gotten a red card and if Frizzell didn't get that yellow card early on, we probably won that final. We were just in a rich vein of form, I felt. You know, that team then is better than this team now, and part of that is, sure, we've lost some experienced players, but, you know, I thought this is what you wanted. This is the job you wanted. And I would have thought that what you'd be putting out there in year number 2 of having the job would be a lot better than what was being served up last year, and a lot better than what was, you know, served up at the World Cup, ideally. Or is that just a weird thing to ask? I don't know. I'll work through some more comments. Thank you again for people who are joining in here. DSPN YouTube channel, we are live a day after that All Black loss to South Africa. We've been going for about 40 minutes now, so I will wrap this up soon. I do thank you for all the comments, all the likes, the shares, all the support. I'm sure there's a lot of gloating sappers in the comments. A lot of comments coming through here. QQ says NZ losing reputation means losing millions in cash deals. I tell you what, the aura and the specialty attached to the All Black jumper, how great and almighty and brilliant it is. We're losing that a little bit now if we keep losing tests like this, because we're not the best rugby nation in the world at the moment. It's without a doubt the Springboks. I mean, they are without a doubt the best in the world. You know, we can't claim any sort of better than them status overall, you know, that the All Black brand and what they are and who they are is better than South Africa. We cannot claim that until we win another World Cup, as far as I'm concerned. Or maybe we can return serve and win like 5 or 6 tests in a row against South Africa. By the way, we've lost 5 of our last 6 against them, which isn't great. 5 of our last 6 we've lost to South Africa. Our one win, we were lucky wasn't a draw, which was last week. Man, gosh. Yeah, lost the last 5 out of 6 against the Boks. Thank you, Sandor. Remember, the Boks have had heavy losses. Lost 57-0 2017, 49-0 2006. Went on to win 2007 and 90 World Cups. Brilliant. Thank you, Raymond. What was that 49-0 loss? Was that to New Zealand? Wasn't to us, was it? I actually can't remember that test. So enlighten me in the comments, please. 49-0 when the Springboks lost. Actually, I can just look it up on my laptop here. List of Springboks tests. I'm a lover of stats and history, and this is one that I don't know, and I'm disappointed that I don't. Where are we? 2006. Here we go. 49-0 to Australia. Wow. That was in Brisbane. Yeah, because that same year, because the All Blacks beat, the Springboks a couple of weeks later. Actually, we beat them twice, and then they had one test against us in Rustenburg, which Jake White his head was on the chopping block. If they lost in Rustenburg, then he would have lost his job. And sure enough, they beat us. And then they beat Australia, lost to Ireland, lost to England, beat England. So yeah, 2006, not a good year at all for the Springboks. Look, yeah, South Africa have had big defeats. There's just always been something about the All Blacks, though. Outside of the World Cups, we just don't lose like this. We don't lose a lot of tests. Like, I was looking at stats from 2011 to 2014. So from the first game of the World Cup in 2011 against Tonga, right through to when we beat we lost to the Springboks in 2014, which I think was at Ellis Park, maybe, I'm not too sure. So that's 3 and a bit years. We lost 1 test, and that was to England at the end of 2012, it was, yeah. We lost 1 test. For a 3 and a bit year period, we lost 1 test. How incredible is that? And I think we drew 1 or 2 as well. We drew a game to Australia. I feel like we've got a draw, maybe a couple of draws to Australia in there, maybe. 1 test we lost. 1. I don't think, at least in the modern era, South Africa have never really done that. That's the difference between the All Blacks and the Springboks, is that we just have this level that we maintain. Not anymore. We've lost that now, haven't we? We just don't have that. I miss the days when we lost once or twice a year. Now we're getting thrashed. Sam Greer, yeah, I miss them too. I miss them too, Sam. And I tell you what, and Marty's quick to say the younger generation don't care. I tell you what, for someone of my age, I care. I'm 27, not far off 28, so maybe I'm not as young. But I care. Man, I care. I hate it when we lose. I physically feel hurt. It hurts. Because I used to get up during the night to watch us play Italy in Rome, you know. When I was young, I'd get up during the night to watch those sort of meaningless tests. I love the All Blacks. I love this team so much. So much. And it is painful when we lose these tests. It is painful. And it's unacceptable. You cannot go on losing tests like this. Unacceptable. Stop haka practice and catch the ball instead. That's from PB. I actually thought we weren't too bad under the high ball, to be honest. I thought in parts we weren't too bad. Again, I thought South Africa were better. Same aura as Wales, lol. That's a bit harsh, Sam. I don't agree with that. PB says agree. AB's game plan beyond their talent. I don't know what it is. Are the players just confused? Is the game plan confusing them? Not too sure. Fozzie handled the pressure way better and went where needed to made changes when we needed to. That's from Tanui Jeffries. Thank you, Tanui. Yeah, the one thing about Ian Foster that was incredible is that he was public enemy number one for a long period of time. Then it flipped. But even when no one liked him, he still was incredibly respectful. He was his demeanour was so incredible. He held himself so well. He didn't really bag anyone. Got to say, he handled it like a real gentleman, did Ian Foster. Not saying Razor's not, by the way. I don't think Razor's handled things terribly, but yeah. Ian Foster actually, with everything he went through, handled everything very well. Brian says Blackadder. If you talk about Ethan Blackadder, Blackadder's got a broken thumb, I think, so he's out for the rest of the NPC at least. Mixed was right all along. That's from Alex. You might have a point there, Alex. That's a crazy stat, Mike Nemi. I think you talked about that All Blacks losing one test in about a 3.5 year span. You can't spell it because you're thick. That's from Mark. I think that might be directed at someone else. Maybe. Yeah, 49-0 was against Aussie 2006. Yep. Our aerial game was horrible. Yep, the kicking game in particular, aimless kicking again from Damien McKenzie. I thought we weren't too terrible under the high ball. I don't think we were. I thought Leo Ricardo was pretty good in parts. McKenzie was good in parts, but we lost that battle. Colby is so tall and big, lol. Yeah, Colby's a funny one, isn't he? He really makes up for his lack of size. Again, thank you for all the comments. There's so many here. I could just read these for hours. There's just so many coming through. But yeah, long story short, because there's been a nice long live stream, embarrassing from the All Blacks. Simply not good enough, unacceptable, painful to watch, painful to endure as a fan who loves this team. I'm not going to sit here and say that Scott Robertson should lose his job and be sacked. We're far from that point. I will back the coach. Obviously, if we lose the Bledisloe Cup, that's a different story. Then I think heads will be on chopping blocks. I think it could be similar to when Ian Foster lost 2 assistants in 2022, John Plumtree and Brad Moore, who I felt were sort of scapegoats. Well, I felt Brad Moore was a bit of a scapegoat. John Plumtree, from things that I'd heard, probably needed to move on, just from things I'd heard. So I wonder if that'll happen this year at some point if these results continue, that Razor will lose a couple of his assistants. I could see Scott Hansen and Jason Holland losing their jobs. I think Jason Ryan is safe. I'm not saying I want that to happen. I never want people to lose their jobs. But when you are in a business like this where results are your biggest measure of performance and you're not getting results, you're gone. It's just how it works. American sport, Premier League football, those sort of sports are really ruthless with this sort of stuff. I think maybe New Zealand rugby need to start being ruthless if these results continue. Not good enough from the All Blacks. Not good enough. Totally outplayed in every department of the game. There was promise in the first half. The second half was embarrassing. Was weak, soft, and was everything that you wouldn't expect from an All Blacks side. So I really hope that we see some change and some response. But this team has some serious fixing to do. They've got to look in some mirrors and they've got to fix themselves. There are some issues that need to be sorted out. Maybe there needs to be some bold selections made. Maybe Razor and his colleagues need to look in the mirror a little bit and understand that maybe the game plan isn't working. We need to change some things up. I'm not too sure. But something's got to change because this team doesn't lose like this. It's not good enough. It shouldn't happen. It should never happen. It is embarrassing. It hurts. I know that you guys are hurting. I'm hurting. The sun did come up. It is pissing down with rain in Auckland right now, though, so the sun's barely come up. But, yeah, it's just painful. It physically hurts. It physically hurts. We will be back on the DSPN YouTube channel, Spotify video, all of those places that you get your podcast. We'll be back tomorrow. Tony Johnson will feature plenty to dissect. Yeah, we could talk for days about this. This is the beauty of not really the beauty, but this is what goes on when the All Blacks lose. We can talk for days. We mourn together for days. Yeah, and that's what will be going on this week. And that Eden Park test against the Wallabies it feels a while away. And when we get round to it, it's going to feel like a long time since that last test against the Springboks, because a lot's going to go on between now and then in terms of what we talk about, how we dissect that defeat, you know, what comes out of All Blacks camp, what gets said in the media, what do the coaches and the players say, how do they respond? There's a lot's going to go on for the next 2 weeks. So, and you can see most of it, if not all of it, right here on the DSPN. Again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for all the comments. Thank you for the likes, the shares, everything. Appreciate all the support. Martin Devlin will feature this week. We'll try and get him on a call from Europe, get him involved and get him just to tee off, because it would be great to have Marty feature in that manner. But yeah, thank you again. I am sorry. It hurts. I know it hurts. It's meant to. No real reason to explain. Let's just hope that the All Blacks respond.